Hey YouTube, Time Itself here. I'm going to spend a fairly lengthy video talking about the Xbox One. Microsoft had their original release conference, and now we've had their E3 presentation, and we've really got some information to go on. I want to focus on my reactions, comments, thoughts, and analysis to everything that we know so far about the Xbox One. I know there's been a lot about the required connection and their licensing. Let's spend a little bit talking about that, but I don't want to get into too much of the what I think they should do. I also just want to talk about the why and how I think it might affect people. Anyway, this is going to be lengthy, so let me break it down what you can expect in this video. So there should be annotations on the screen and links in the description if you want to jump forward. First up, we're going to talk hardware. They made a big deal about their transistors and their RAM and all that stuff. We're going to go into that and where that fits into the whole console history. And the price point that they finally released at E3 now. We'll talk about controllers, headsets, and the Kinect as well. And then we're going to get into why they called it the Xbox One. It functioned as a media center. It's gonna be a little on the short side. Then we're going to talk about the game console and especially dedicated servers. I think a lot of people are severely underestimating how absolutely huge this is going to be for the Xbox One, and I really want to dig into that. Then we're going to talk about digital sales, the required connection, the licensing issues, and all that stuff, and has people kind of worked up, and how marketing job Microsoft has done has not been the greatest, but we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that. First, let's take a look at what we know about the hardware between the original press conference and now at E3. They made a big deal about their 5 billion transistors and 8 gigabytes of RAM. Now, let me try to put some context around some of that stuff. The only way I know to talk about transistor counts is to apply Moore's Law. That thing where every 2 years the transistor count basically doubles. Now, the reason for that is that they're getting smaller. Things are getting smaller. So what we might actually want to look at is how big are the features on the CPU and GPU that is going to be in the Xbox One. Alright, here we have the CPU feature size for the last 2 generations of consoles and the generation that we're entering now. So that's everything PS2, GameCube, Xbox, 360, PS3, Wii, the slim versions of the PS3 and 360, and then we've got the Wii U and the Xbox One and the PS4 that's coming up. And you'll see things are getting smaller. That's why we see you can make the same chip, the same power performance for cheaper, or you can make something more powerful that costs the same amount. But it also helps you, it means you can do the same calculations with require less energy, it means less heat. So that's the trend. It's not a perfect line. I mean, that's my dotted line is my estimation, but I could go back and look. And I think I would note here is that the feature size is a little large. And I don't know what to say exactly. I don't entirely understand. I'm just guessing that they're going to probably come out with a new chipset and it's going to feature a smaller process size. I would even bet that the new 360 they announced at the E3 press conference probably has a smaller feature size than what we're speculating the Xbox One and PS4 will have at 40, because they're down well below that already now. This is older stuff, so I don't know what exactly they're doing, but that's where things sit. So let's get back to transistor counts. So I went back and tried to compile a total number of transistors between CPU and GPU for the same set of consoles. And it's actually kind of tricky, different architectures, it's hard to see where numbers are coming from, so I put out the caveat here. I've probably screwed something up horribly, and someone will come along and correct me, but this is the best I was able to do. So again, PS2, Xbox, GameCube era, then the gen we're kind of transitioning out of now. You'll see the Wii U, and then what they announced for the Xbox One. And, well, the line is the doubling every 2 years, and I think you agree with me, you say, well, what did you expect? 5 billion sounds just about right. And the big question is, does that include RAM or not? Because that would be the big difference. Now, transistor count is an incredibly crude measure of performance, but I think this chart makes fairly clear that the Wii U, if it had come out 2 years ago, would have been reasonably powerful for its time, but now it kind of bridges a strange gap between the last generation, the 360 PS3, and the Xbox One PS4, and it's going to have a hard time keeping up. And similar, you can tell, the Wii U didn't really have the same power that 360. This is stuff we already knew. Now, I've noticed that the PS3 does have an advantage on the 360 here, but not a gigantic one. It did come out a year later, though. Anyway, let's look at some different tech specs. Alright, let's look at RAM, and again, let me warn you, I've probably screwed something up here. It's hard to make these comparisons because the different architectures, people will say, oh, the PS3 only had 256 megabytes. No, it actually had 512 at half gig. It was just separated in a strange way. Anyway, you get the idea again. The 8 gigabytes is right what we should expect for the console generation coming up this year. If you expected more, I think you were a bit crazy, honestly. Alright, and finally, let's look at hard drive size. The first Xbox was a pretty notable console in that it was the first one to ship with a hard drive at 8 gigabytes. And since then, hard drives have become standard. Now, the 360 was a bit undersized. Even the Pro model with the large hard drive was only 20. The PS3 had a wide range of options, anywhere from 20 to 80 on release. And, well, we saw the Slim come out with 250. And now we're looking at 500 for this next gen with the Xbox One. And again, it looks to be about on target, though if everything is going to be DLC, going to be downloadable, going to be on that disc, that seems a bit small. We'll see how useful those USB 3 ports come in, though. We'll find out. So I think what I'm trying to get at here is that if you just took the 360 and updated it 8 years, 4 doubling cycles, 16 times, that's basically what the Xbox One is. I mean, they pretty much took Moore's Law and said, all right, what should we plan on making for this thing? And that's pretty much what they came out with. The surprise comes in that, well, it's $100 more than that 360 console was on release, and I think we have the new Kinect to thank for that. Now, in the current generation, PS3, 360, I can't tell the difference between a lot of games, the cross-platform releases. Battlefield 3, can't tell the difference between the systems. Call of Duty, can't tell the difference. But on Call of Duty, if you go back to the Wii version, it very obviously a different game almost. Not quite, but it's clearly an inferior version. Now, based on what I'm kind of looking at here and guessing what Sony would have done, I'm going to speculate that we will see the same situation continue. And that's not to say, I mean, the PS3 was more powerful than the 360, but not enough so that developers were willing to spend time trying to develop and optimize features for a slightly more powerful system. We may see that, but in general, I think we're going to continue to see the same thing, where Microsoft and Sony, when they're a cross-platform release, it looks and plays very, very similarly. I mean, the biggest difference is going to be the bugs. The systems are more similar now than they were in this previous generation, so who knows what we'll see. Microsoft very proudly announced and rolled out their new Xbox One controller. And yes, there are a couple slight improvements that I appreciate. The guide button being a little further out of the way, I won't push it accidentally quite as often. The D-pad may actually function now and not be a complete piece of shit. That's good. But in general, it's a real disappointment, and I almost wonder, hey, why don't my... well, we went from the original Xbox to the 360, and the new controllers, you had to buy all new controllers. Like, damn it. But at least they'd gone to a standard. They'd gone to USB. You could just plug it right into your computer and go. And now it sounds like you can't use your 360 controllers on the Xbox One, even if they're wired. What's going on with that? Well, do the Xbox One wired controllers work on a PC? I don't know. This seems like more money grabbing. Microsoft looking to pick up licensing fees. Again, the controller is extremely disappointing because we keep having the same issues here. For the original Xbox, I got a controller, I forget what was branded, but it had the buttons on the handles so that you could push what buttons when you wanted, instead of having to try and mess around with a stupid controller. At least as a hardcore gamer, that was what I wanted. And now for the Xbox 360, you can go to Razer. I think that has a saber tooth. I don't have one, but I mean, that looks like the kind of thing I want. Or you can pay money to have your controller modded, just a regular stock controller, and they'll add those things for you. Why isn't Microsoft doing anything about this? We've just gone back with the same old basic controller design. It's really disappointing. I don't know. I'll probably just have to wait for an aftermarket, a third-party controller, to actually give me what I want. Now, Sony isn't doing any better in terms of putting buttons in places where I can reach them without moving my thumbs off the thumbsticks, but at least they're trying new stuff. I don't count force feedback in the triggers as new stuff. We'll see what they can do with the touch screen, but again, cross-platform releases, I don't expect it to make much interesting use of that stuff. On a similar note, Microsoft is changing the headset jack. I don't know where they're going with this, honestly, but right now what we have, well, it works best when the game sound is coming out of the TV, you've got a wireless controller, and then you've got one of those stock headsets with the speaker just on one ear and the boom mic. Because you can listen to the game sound, it's kind of open, not a problem. You can chat with your team, and you can hear what they're saying in one ear. It's kind of an issue when you try to want to wear a gaming headset, because then you have to mix this headset line with the game audio, and it doesn't work that well, and you end up having to have a piece of hardware to do that, and they tend to be cheap and not work too well. I know the pair of PX21s I'm recording on right now, I do not like them at all, and the need for this little piece of hardware to let you work with the Xbox chat really causes a lot of headaches. I don't know where they're going with this. They certainly could go in good directions, but the fact that we're losing this fairly basic standard with this, okay, just use your cell phone headset, just plug it into the controller and go, kind of concerns me. Again, you probably end up paying more for all this licensing stuff. As a YouTuber, if you guys watch my videos, you know that I often like to bring in my team's chat into the game. But I like to record that on a separate audio track, and actually figuring out how to do that with the 360 was kind of a pain, and oh my gosh, but it lets me do some really cool stuff. And I'm really worried about losing that ability with the Xbox One. We'll have to see where things go. I hope this is a positive direction where I could go to just a plain old USB headset or just speakers, mic, and not have to worry about it. But I get the feeling that they're still going to go with this headset jack and the controller, and it's not going to have the game sound too. And so it's just going to leave us needing these strange little boxes to mix the game and the chat audio, and that won't improve the situation at all. So we'll see where things go. I haven't seen any announcement about any peripherals for this kind of stuff. Alright, last topic for hardware, I suppose, has to be the Kinect, but I have to say, I have no experience with the original Kinect, and I look at the new one, I'm like, why is this required? Where would I put it? I mean, I've already got a webcam on top of the monitor that I use both for gaming and my PC, and yeah, it's my PC monitor, so why would I put a Kinect like 2.5 feet in front of my face? I don't know what's going on. I don't know what to say. I just wish I could buy the console without it and save myself like $100. Because that would be a whole lot more tempting to me. You know, when the 360 came out, we're thinking, oh, what kind of awesome video standards will we be able to get? Will we get 1080p at 60 frames per second? Because the console was actually able to output that. It just turns out that it couldn't actually render it at that. And in fact, you either see games at 720 that typically run at 30 frames per second, or you get games like Call of Duty that are actually upscaled from, I think it's 540 to run at 60 frames per second on the 360 hardware. And so now we're with the Xbox One, and what do you want? Well, we still hope for 1080p at 60 frames per second. What we're looking for hasn't really changed. Now they're making a big deal about, yeah, we can do 4K. That's even bigger resolution, but it's going to be the same with the 360. Maybe you can output that, but you'll never render at that kind of settings. I mean, and also the HDMI spec they're using, the 1.4A, only supports 4K up to 30 Hz. That's just the situation we're in, but I don't really see that being a problem. Can we just get 1080p at 60 frames per second? That would be good. The reason why they're calling it the Xbox One is because they want it to be the media center focus of your living room, not just so we can call it the Xbone and laugh. How are they going to do that, though? Well, there are a couple things. First, they've got an IR blaster hooked up on it, so it can send basically any kind of remote control signal at once, in the IR spectrum, that is. They've got the HDMI input, which I assume, because of HDCP, copy protection, you won't actually be able to record anything with it, and besides, it's got a fairly limited hard drive size anyway. But at least it can pass through whatever signal it comes in on that one input. Again, only one. And finally, the HDMI spec includes, what's it called? The Consumer Electronics Control. It's a short list of possible commands that can be sent over that HDMI cable. It includes things like the tuner control, probably some recording stuff. Check out Wikipedia if you want all the stuff. So the simple question that any sane person should be asking is, what does the Xbox One let you do that you can't already? Especially if you already have a 360. Alright, there's the voice control for the IR Blaster remote control. Okay, that's kind of cool, but it basically means you can tell somebody to push the remote button for you. And I have no idea how complicated and messy programming that stuff is going to end up being. I mean, have they resolved any of the issues we had with the 360 version? Like in Netflix, for example, you're paying a subscription for Netflix, but you can't watch it on your Xbox unless you have a gold subscription, and if Live goes down, as it did Saturday several weeks back, Netflix is still working, but you can't watch it on the Xbox because Xbox Live is down. Or ESPN. Now, there are times when ESPN can be kind of cool, and part of it is that you don't need another tuner box. For most stuff you would, but if you're watching ESPN on the Xbox app, then you don't need your another TV tuner box in order to watch it. Kind of useful, man, whatever. Anyway, what ESPN sometimes lets you do, not always, is that you can stream specifically your game. So if you were watching a broadcast stream, they might cut into the beginning of your game with the ending of another game, or they might cut to another game before your game is over. You can watch just your game and not have to worry about that. That's kind of cool. But for that ESPN stuff, you have to have an ISP that's working with them. You can't just subscribe to ESPN. So, example, if you've got DSL, probably won't work. Got a small down cable provider, probably won't work. I've been in both those situations, and there's nothing you can do. It doesn't work. You can't use it. It's not an option for you. It's not cool. But with my new TV service and my new ISP, the TV box does some cool stuff. Some of these things might be included at the Xbox One. For example, if I have the guide up and a movie is halfway over with, but it's also on Netflix, it'll prompt me to go to Netflix instead, and I can start watching it from the beginning without ads on Netflix instead of trying to watch it live. That's kind of cool, kind of useful. Also, I can search, say, for actors, and it'll pull up everything between what I've got recorded, what's coming up, recorded on the DVR, what's coming up in the TV guide, and what's on Netflix. That's pretty cool. The downside here is that, in addition to some other issues, is that your Xbox One probably won't know what is on your TV's DVR. And so that could be kind of messy, and you'd also lose out on some cool features like that. Now with the 360, if you set things up right, you can take a little fiddling, you can stream video to your console from your computer. That's kind of useful, and also it helps deal with the lag of hard drive space at times. However, what I'm really hoping to see with the Xbox One is more supported codecs. That is kind of limiting right now, especially if you get into some HD formats. Finally, I have to say that all these cool features might be nice, but I have a hard time seeing them selling systems, at least not in the way that being a Blu-ray player sold the PS3. So, yeah, I still don't understand the reason to focus on TV so much, especially when it's still somewhat limited. We'll just have to see what people end up using it for, or buying it for. In previous console generations, there's been a fairly consistent, if developing, set of standards of what you can expect from a console, a game console, in terms of ease of use, installation, the lifespan you can get out of things, how you buy peripherals. All that stuff is fairly standard to consoles, though some of it may change here. So I'm not entirely surprised that we're not seeing particularly good backwards compatibility, that you're going to have to buy new controllers and headsets and all sorts of stuff. That's just kind of one of the things that goes with consoles. Part of that longer lifespan is that there's usually a larger break when you get there, even if it doesn't seem like it's for a reason, like for the controllers, as I noted earlier. And the console manufacturers like to make it out to be some huge improvement rather than just a slow incremental step of progress. They'll sell you on all sorts of stuff, and especially at the press conference we're talking about Xbox One will have, and I think it would be much better read as Xbox One developers should have to include. So things like new achievements. They threw around some really vague terms that I'm like, what are you going to mean? I will be interested in seeing what their guidelines to the developers and publishers are for what achievements should be for the new system, rather than them just saying Xbox One will have this stuff. Tell me what you're telling the developers that how these new achievements should be. and we'll see how it works out. But I think the manufacturer promising all sorts of stuff, when in turn it's just the developers and the publishers having to do all this stuff. How is it actually going to be implemented? I really wonder about that. Wired has reported that every Xbox One multiplayer game will have dedicated servers. Exactly what they mean by this, we're not entirely sure, especially on all the details, but the assumption is that we're getting rid of the peer-to-peer model like we see in Call of Duty and going more for the Battlefield 3 model. And people are talking about, oh, won't it be nice to have dedicated servers for your game? Yes, it will be nice, but I think they're critically missing some of how just absolutely important and how critical this could be to the system's success. So I'm going to talk about that for a while. But first, let's step back and talk about party chat. Now, the Xbox 360 launched, and chat was a fairly standard feature in games and multiplayer games, but you'd normally chat just your team or the lobby. Chatting between games wasn't really a thing. I mean, yes, you had that individual chat, but the party wasn't there. That became new. And it resolved some issues that we're having. You know, if matchmaking, for example, in Modern Warfare 2, just didn't work right, and if, you know, the lobby got destroyed, then suddenly you just wouldn't hear anything from people you thought were in there who were telling you, hey, where did you go? And having party chat resolved that issue. And it's not the most complicated thing. It still has its issues occasionally. You just can't connect to people, can't get everyone in the party. But it generally works, and it's fairly reliable, and just get in there. Now, I'd put it about on the same level of Skype in terms of performance. It's a fairly decent chat program. If I want to get really serious, I'll go to something like Ventrilo, where you know, we have a server, and you just have to worry about people connecting to the server. And if you can connect to the server, things are good. And especially what's useful in Vent is the ability to adjust individual volume levels. That can be a real pain. As you had that one guy in your Xbox Live Party who was the really, really loud microphone. But nonetheless, Xbox Live Party Chat, fairly simple, not the most complicated, but it works. And how much it improves your experience on that system seems to be so underestimated when it first came out. It's like, oh, you won't have to listen to the squeakers anymore. Well, that's good, but it turns out just as a general chat program, it's useful, it's good, it works. You know, there's nothing wrong with it. And the fact that developers no longer have to sit around and reinvent the wheel for chat every time, though you kind of expect them to, the fact that if they screw that up, you still got party chat to fall back on is really nice. And now, with the Xbox One, the developers don't have to reinvent the wheel in terms of matchmaking and hosting games with every game. That'll let them focus on other stuff in their games, be more useful, and the Microsoft team can focus on making matchmaking and hosting games working right. Because, honestly, I feel like things are going downhill. Halo 2, Halo 3, matchmaking, fairly good. Not perfect, but it was fairly reliable. Then comes along Call of Duty, and oh man, Call of Duty has its issues, and it lacks a lot of those features. But it still kind of works. And then you get Homefront comes along, and it does this weird thing where large games are hosted on dedicated servers, but small games are peer-to-peer. But when it first came out, oh my god, it was a mess because they didn't have enough servers, and so you couldn't even play the smaller peer-to-peer game. And it took them a while to get that straightened out. It really hurt that game. And then you have DICE come out with Battlefield 3, and there is essentially no matchmaking. It is a disaster, and it's one of the reasons why I have a lot of issues with that game, because there is essentially no matchmaking for Battlefield 3. It makes it really, really hard to play with your friends. And so if Microsoft is going to take this over and say, hey, we're going to do this right, you just send us the player names and their parties when they want to get into a game, and we'll put them in there, we'll take care of hosting it and ranking it, and we're going to resolve so many of these issues. Now, I expect them to virtualize a lot of this stuff so that if they need another server in some part of the country, oh, we need another one over in New York, or we need one over in San Francisco. A virtual server comes online wherever they need it to pops up, and there they go. And because of this standardization, a company can't just say, oh, we're shutting down all the servers for this game, because we have to host, you know, so many of them. Now they can just come up whenever they're needed, and if they're not needed, then they're not paying for that stuff. That's because they've got this huge pool of servers there, and they can just bring up another virtual server for whatever game they need, wherever they need it. That's going to deal with a lot of games getting old. If they have the capacity, which, cross your fingers, if they have the capacity, that's going to let them expand to more servers when a game launches and is really successful. So you're not going to get another home front where the developer and publisher are just struggling to bring up as many servers as they can, as fast as they can, because the game is more popular than they realize. If they've already virtualized on Microsoft's massive, system for Xbox Live, and they just keep bringing more of those things online as fast as they need to, no more problems. And so this is where Microsoft could just flat out win this console generation, or lose it for that matter. If on launch a game is not, matchmaking is not working on the PS4, but somehow Microsoft's massive Xbox One dedicated server system is holding up, and assuming it works like we think it will, I'm just guessing here, but if it can, which console would you buy? Which version of the game would you buy? Well, matchmaking works on one and it doesn't work right now on the other, and if you want to buy it right now, you really only have one choice. I think this level of standardization is a great thing, because again, developers stop having to reinvent the wheel, and if you just need to keep bringing up more virtual servers, as long as you have enough total out there, it could work. And I think no one's really spotted this. Maybe I'm just way off here, but I think this could be one of the most critical aspects. I mean, it's like the party chat for the Xbox One. That's how important this could be. So Microsoft has made it fairly clear that they're no longer interested in selling games, instead they want to license them to you. Yeah, we're headed in some strange directions. I don't really like it. I frankly find it kind of insulting, but here's one thought as to where they're coming from. A couple court rulings. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm just trying to sort through this and figure out where they could be coming from. And it essentially says that, software is licensed and not sold when they tell you it's a license, when they restrict your ability to transfer the software, and when they impose notable use restrictions. And essentially, I think that's where the always online limits on sharing with friends and trading and rental come from. They're essentially saying, yes, okay, if we tell you it's a license and then we tell you you can't share it, well, then that makes it a license. Or, with the checking in every 24 hours, then, yeah, so congratulations, you're no longer buying games, you are licensing them. Now, this is the US, however, and the EU is a little different here. And big old wall of text, but if my understanding is right, it basically says that if you sell a customer a copy, it doesn't matter if it's download or on disk, and includes a right to use it for an unlimited period of time, then the copyright holder can no longer restrict the resale of that copy. I mean, I don't even know this applies, but I was just trying to look around and figure out what was going on, and this was one of the things I ran into, and it seems to be fairly different from the US Ninth Circuit one. Now again, I'm not a lawyer, I don't even know where this is going, I have a hard time saying if this stuff is even for certain applies here, and what I really would like to be able to say is, you would expect to work under this set of rules in the US and under this set of rules in the EU, but we can't even go that far yet. And maybe they'll pass some laws in the respective jurisdictions that says, no, you have to do it like this. Who knows where things end up at this rate. Here's a teaser for you. Would they ever go to licensing video like Microsoft is proposing to license games here? What would be your reaction to that? It's some interesting food for thought. Now, as I seem to recall, the biggest issue with DLC licensing on the 360 was that your DLC is tied to both your live account and the Xbox you originally downloaded on, so that anybody else who uses it on that Xbox doesn't have to log in for you in order to use it. Now, if the issue comes is, if you had your Xbox go bad and you had to send it back, suddenly you have to change the licensing to be on your new Xbox so that you don't always have to be logged in for someone else to use it on your new console. And apparently getting that changed was quite the issue. I'm not sure where it stands right now, but I was looking around and it said 20 to 30 days. And yeah, so that's kind of a mess. So they keep talking about your console. Keep in mind that if you have to change your console, I don't know if things are going to be any better than they were in the 360 generation. I could join the whole chorus of people complaining and arguing about all the digital rights stuff on the 360, and yes, I find it insulting, but I think I will stick to simply comparing it to PC and saying right now you do have something of a difference between console and PC. Not everything has DRM on the PC. There's plenty of stuff without it, but a lot of the major releases do. And if you want to have the right of first sale on your for something for a game, then you can buy it on a console, and that's what you have. It's, give and take, and it's part of the comparison between PC and console. And the more that console becomes more like PC with its DRM and all these restrictions, the less choice you have, the fewer options, and in some ways it might make the decision to move to PC easier. If you have to put up with the same nonsense on both systems for the most part, going with the more open platform might be much more tempting. I find it particularly interesting and telling that the more information, the more marketing material they try to give us to explain what's going on, the more questions that come up. And it's getting confusing. I mean, Microsoft keeps trying to do this thing where they try to get you one logon, where everything is, when you try to be, what was it, 10 years ago it was Passport for Hotmail and your games and Messenger. And Messenger has gone away, but it's essentially just replaced by Skype, and we'll see what happens. In the end, again, compare PC to console and compare what your use case is. And, well, if you're not that old, if you haven't been moving around a whole lot, as we often do when we're young, realize that you're not always going to have the same ISP and the same kind of service, the internet speeds that you're used to where you are. You might be slower, it might be faster. I have been all over the place, and today I have ridiculously fast internet. Next year I might be somewhere else and might have terrible internet. So I don't know. That's why some of their statements and some of their policies just really concern me. For a while, I lived with two housemates, and we had one 12-down, 1-up DSL connection, and we all trying to watch Netflix at the same time. That was funny. And now we have gigabit service, and it's like, oh, the connection doesn't matter. Do whatever you want. Who knows what your case is going to be. It's just another thing you have to try and figure out when you're shopping for your gaming device, PC or console. One thing I know is I do try to take my security fairly seriously, and I would really like some two-factor authentication if I'm going to be putting hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars on an account. I want to be able to know that that is secure. So Microsoft kept saying there was something about the 360 they couldn't do two-factor authentication. It sends you a short text message and you have to enter the code every time you want to change consoles or something like that. Google does it, works fairly well between Gmail and YouTube. Where is the equivalent for the Xbox One? Because that really makes a difference. I had my account hijacked at one point. I have no idea how they got the password, but it took a while to get it back, and I am in no hurry to repeat that experience. Microsoft put out a fairly interesting statement, among a bunch of other bullet points, but it said, because every Xbox One owner has a broadband connection, developers can create massive, persistent worlds that evolve even when you're not playing. And this is just, I don't know, this is a marketing failure right here. It should read, if you don't have a broadband connection, Xbox One is not for you. And then the second thing is pure BS, because we've all played MMOs with persistence, evolving, and you don't need to be connected to those all the time. So it's, I don't know, like I said, the marketing, they try to explain stuff, it just brings up more questions, and you have to really wonder if the marketing people actually know what they're talking about, or if they're just trying to spin things. I really just want to wait and see, let somebody else buy it first, and see what their experience is. Alright, I could go on and on about the old Xbone here, but I think this is good. My longest video yet. I think much more would be a lot of speculation, and so that's not particularly interesting for me. We'll just have to see where things go. Certainly say that some of the games they showed off at E3 really sparked my interest. I'm going to be following them and seeing where they go. As far as PS4, I don't know if I'll do such an extensive video, but I will certainly be looking at all options out there for this next generation. Guys, I want to thank you for sticking around through this very lengthy video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you thought it was interesting. And we'll get back to some more straight up gaming next time. Anyway, thanks again, and I'll see you next time.